Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most Christmassy work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we're coming at you live in the Discord on this most tragic of occasions when Musser has been defeated. Oh, so sad. He, for one, was a leader I was willing and very comfortable to rally behind, and I think he was flawless. And you know what? I'd be in the 60% to put my hand up. What can I say?
Yeah, I mean, Musser or Charles. Say you had to pick Musser or Charles, like you're Kenneth, and you have to pick one. I don't think Musser's that bad a choice.
I don't know why you think Kenneth is picking between Musser or Charles, because if anything, being
No, I mean, they're
by
explicitly
definition
not.
means not picking between Musser or Charles.
Yeah, no, the whole story has been how then refusing to do that. But I'm saying, say you did have to, like,
Yeah, okay. It's probably Charles for me. Just like
but it's closer. It's closer than it should be.
Closer
isn't it?
than it should be, but I do appreciate the kind of, I don't know, fuck it all up mindset.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I go back and forth. Whenever I mentally commit to one, I then think of the problems with them and swing back over to the other. Like I'm just yo-yoing. I'll just go with Durocher. Just follow the power.
You follow the power. Yeah. But yeah, so we're here to talk about Cross with Silver, 1907 and 19Z, was it? I can't remember.
Yeah.
What it was. 19Z, yeah. Let's get into it. 1917 starts with the Kenneteers, the previous chapter, have challenged Musser, so the judges recall him. He's a bit indignant, but they prep for their challenge and the parents rally behind them. What a fun prep it is.
Yeah, I really like how it was really fun leaving last week's chapter on that cliffhanger of we challenge Musser to everything he is. Like, it was a great sort of powerful moment, but I like that then this chapter doesn't sort of launch straight into it, but also then takes the time to be like, okay, here's what that actually means, and like here's the stakes of it. Like, if it had all been one chapter, I kind of feel like this might have been the lead up to that moment, like but I'm still happy that it's sort of like, hey, we took this time to be like, this is a big decision. Here's why they're making it. Here's how they're getting everyone else on board. Like, we didn't just launch straight into the challenge, but we actually spend the first chunk of the chapter hyping it up and making it clear what this means.
Yeah. You're right. It helps to build it up. There's a great moment that I want to call out where Verona makes a comparison between the very serious situation they're in and a board game called Babel, which is seemingly kind of, a word game, a Scrabble-esque word game.
Yeah.
And Charles's response is like, yeah, Verona, it's like Babel, except the consequences are more severe, in this most condescending tone, and it's very fun. It's a very peak Charles moment, which I loved.
I mean, we're not in Verona's head, but I think part of her enjoys pissing people off by making comparisons like this. Like, I almost feel like she intentionally enjoys pissing people off by taking big situations and comparing them to, like, Scrabble knockoffs.
Yeah.
Like, in the same way it was like when last week when she came in and she was like, she'd been reading about how to do stuff that demiurges do in their things for her domain. And so she was going to use like demiurgic fucking god divine shit to like repair Lucy's wall. And it's just like, I think she just really enjoys like playing with those two extremes and kind of annoying people and like fucking with lines like that. Like when people are like, this is a big thing, that's a small thing, Verona's just like, I'm going to merge them together and like fuck with shit.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is a classic Verona moment. And speaking of classic Verona moments, we get the great bit where the parents rally behind their respective children, and then an awkward silence hangs over the crowd as everyone looks to Verona, which was great. But then it resolves in a really fun way of like the entire town kind of rallying behind her. Verona's in for a good chapter this week of realizing that, actually, the impression that she and we have of her being a bit isolated and not maybe the best morally if she wasn't caught by the safety net, like is not necessarily true. She makes a good showing this chapter.
Yeah, but like overall, I think the whole convincing the parents moment it really leans into what we were just talking about with like building up this challenge. Like
Yes.
Lucy and Jasmine have obviously been at odds about Lucy's role in a lot of this stuff for quite a while now. So being able to convince Jasmine that this is necessary and Lucy should do it, and getting Jasmine and Connor to sign off on it, like feels like this big moment. And then it starts to get undercut. Like as you said, we then turn to Verona and she's like, "Oh, whoops." And then you get like the found family moment of like the town coming in, and like I love that Mal sort of leads it of all people. It's just like, yeah, reminding Verona like the community is behind them and they've built this community, and that's such a fun thing particularly to remind us about as we get into this challenge. And the conceit of the challenge is literally, but what if you didn't have that community?
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's good stuff. And then yeah, fuck Musser is the classic lead into the challenge.
Especially because I love the bit where Miss was like fuck Musser, and honestly part of me was like it reminded me of the feeling I had the first time I heard my parents swear as a kid, where I was like, she said that. And then like Avery calls out the same thing. It's just like the first time we've ever heard Miss swear, and like again, just more and more gravity to the moment.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very teacher. You hear a teacher swear moment, or
Yeah,
you see
yeah.
a teacher outside of school living their life moment. It's good stuff.
Um, and then like the other thing here as well is the bit where Charles is like, "Oh yes, you really got his goat," and fucking basically winks at the camera. Um, like drops a hint, sort of so obvious, even Avery's able to pick it up. And it's just such a great moment because it's like this is the real delivery on the goat. Like it's been called out a lot in the fandom as that sort of a parody of Musser and his whole shtick, and Charles really brings it full circle here by using it to make the Kenneteers realize what Musser is.
Mm.
It's yeah, like Charles is so close to being really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Like this is great. The goat line here, the setup, the delivery, it's all just excellent. And it's like, Charles, why couldn't you be like this all the time?
Mm. Yeah, he could be cool. He could be so cool, huh? Oh well.
No. And just like again, the hype that's building up. Like I was just on the edge of my seat this whole chapter because like the Kenneteers sort of figure out his heroic. It helps them like
Mm-hmm.
narrow in their challenge. And there's that bit where like Musser starts to look scared, and even Avery's sort of calling him out for being scared. She doesn't even realize she's saying it. Like it's so hype. Like I don't know. I was going into this chapter and it was just like the most excited I think I've been since like summer break sort of stuff. Maybe.
Yeah, it's really hype, isn't it?
Yeah.
The bit where they say to Musser, we stand on, where Lucy says something like standing on your own merits without your family or anything, and he smiles and looks at Charles, and then is like, "You helped him, didn't you?" And it's just like, "Oh shit, they've got him, like he's on the ropes." So good.
Yeah. And then again, Charles deflects it brilliantly. He's like, all I said is they got your goat. And it's like fucking he's definitely been hanging out with an ex-Fae. Like that's
Yeah,
brilliant
very
wordplay.
fun. Yeah. So yeah, to challenge Musser's, so the question of Musser's legitimacy is kind of shot down, but they move on from this to challenging Musser's leadership, and they are asked to prove that they would have done better than him, or who would do better in kind of equal conditions. Everyone's stripped of all their connections and shit, and they try again. And first we
Yeah.
get Avery.
Oh, but it's like I want to like talk about the whole concept of this challenge because it's such an interesting idea. Because like fundamentally, I think it's the Aurum later says like this is still sort of them. Like these simulations skew towards decisions they've made or doors they've opened. Like it sort of pushed them in similar-ish directions. But then like also like clearly it doesn't change everything. Like Verona still grows up with her dad. Avery we don't know the details of Musser's, but like to some degree he was probably still a member of his family or something. Like
Yes.
it's this weird thing where like it doesn't fully take circumstances out of the equation, but also like if you fully took circumstances out of the equation, you get into this really murky nature versus nurture thing of
Yeah.
like
Like
how much
who
of their
actually are they? Yeah.
how much of their raw souls and selves like different. Like it's probably an impossible sort of thing to answer without just like Walbo deciding for this universe what's nature and what's nurture, which I can see why you wouldn't want to do that, but like it, because you can't do that, it's just so funny to me that it's like in terms of its scientific merit, I don't know how valid this simulation really is.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to say, isn't it? It
Yeah,
does feel like it's got some soft edges, but I think that's impossible to avoid. And
I know, but
Durocher, I
then
guess, ends up using that to their advantage
yeah,
later.
I guess my point is then stop doing this shit. Like it kind of doesn't make sense. It's like when you hear about court procedures, the sort of like witnesses are valued so much by the court, but there's
Yeah.
so much evidence that witnesses are like pretty unreliable and memory changes a lot. And
Yeah,
it's
but I
sort of
guess
that thing of like,
it's the same question, which is like,
yeah,
what's the alternative?
oh,
you
yeah, I
know,
don't know. They're big, powerful
there's
judges.
some
There's got
way
to be
of
some.
trying to decide these things. That seems like it's the most. I don't know. It feels like it's the most the most equal way, I guess, of arbitrating this.
Yeah, but this is the whole thing of this world because you could litigate the exact merits of this simulation, which just starts to drive you in circles, which I guess is kind of what the legal process is. So yeah,
Mm,
it's good stand-in for it.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so we get into Avery's challenge, and it starts by us seeing Avery at her lowest, which is very interesting. We see presumably what is the scene where Mrs. Hardy kind of earned her place in Avery's heart, but with a different ending where Mrs. Hardy doesn't step in, which is
Mm.
very heartbreaking to see.
Yeah. Like it seems like essentially this is what happened in. I was gonna say in real life, but you know what I mean. Um,
Mm,
like in the actual timeline, but Miss Hardy didn't get taken away by I can't remember which teacher it is that comes and gets her, but like, Avery would have broken down. So it's like Avery's simulation is taking away also Miss Hardy. Like, yeah, the I mean, this is why this chapter started with Avery, I think, because we really want to hit this hammer on the head of like the point of this simulation is to put them at their loneliest, and it's like, well, that was where Avery kicked off the story.
mm, yeah.
Conceptually, this is so cool. Like, just it's so perfectly otherverse that this challenge is like literally examining their growth and like
Yeah.
challenging like let's see how you would have done in other circumstances, particularly because Pale from the get-go has been about this idea of community and how we're stronger together, and then this ultimate challenge is okay, let's put the protagonists on their own and see how they do it. It's just of course this is like how a big thing in the otherverse happens. And then, in retrospect, a lot of things where as they started to lose, I was like, of course they did. The whole point of Kennet from the start is that their community was their strength. Of course they
Yeah.
fucking lost.
But it is very interesting because, like, they're right. This is a very. This doesn't feel like an unfair challenge to me. Like maybe Musser still gets more than he should, but he's been cut off from his whatever the thing that he was given to start him off, which is a lot. And so are the trio. The only thing the
Yeah,
trio were given at the start was some power from Kennet and each other, right? Like, and so it does feel fair to me, like that they're
yeah,
put in this situation, and it sucks. I hate it, but it's fair.
yeah. There's that funny bit where they're like, oh, we got to separate Musser from his bloodline, and then he's like, okay, but you guys have to go individually. And Lucy's like,
Yep.
no, we work together. And I was like, I'm sorry, Lucy, but if you're going to separate him from the bloodline, him
Yeah.
calling out you guys being a trio feels at least as fair as that. Like,
100%. Yes.
like you can't like that's some Masurian bullshit to try and pull that you guys get to stay a trio and he doesn't. Like,
Yeah.
I'm glad she didn't really put up much of a fight on it because it was clearly bullshit. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's just like this is at this point in Pale, we've got like 7 or 8 major climaxes in the story, but this is one of them, and it's just so perfect that it's like yeah, let's re-examine how our protagonists would do in other circumstances to really track their journeys. I just love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so yeah, we then see Verona's and see her doing very well. She still is a friendly and helpful person that collects cool others around herself, even without Avery and Lucy to learn and grow from.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw Verona's as much more of a mixed bag. I wouldn't have said she was doing very well. I don't know.
Sure.
It's all over the place. Is how I would like I because Verona's is weird. It's like you're right. She's definitely a big takeaway, especially for Verona out of hers, is that it turns out even without Lucy, she's still maybe kind of a good person. Which is obviously a shocking revelation. But like she's in a lot of other ways where we tune into her, she's not doing well. Like we see that she's still in her like habitual lying phase at the start here. Like she's just stealing stuff from this store.
Yeah.
Brett's about the same, which is obviously horrific. I don't think the judges could have made him worse. Uh, and then obviously there's this whole drinking scene with Haley and stuff, which is like, yeah, like again, she's avoiding the drugs and stuff and like other fears that she's had. So it's definitely not like as bad as Avery's was just a bit ago,
Yeah.
but it's certainly like she's dating Jeremy in this universe, and she's still obviously not really comfortable with that. She just doesn't really know what her options are, and all of her friends are much more like people who fit in. So she's not as able to just question stuff like that. So she's certainly like a real mixed bag, I would have said.
Mm. Yeah. That's fair. I feel like the thing that is really good here that we see is she is a mixed bag, but once she gets out from under her dad and Kenneth, I guess it seems like it really turns around to me. She is untethered from that negativity and really starts to blossom, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of disagree because obviously, she dies because Kevin drops a tree on her, and
Mm.
what's called out by everyone is that like the problem is without, I guess, any tempering forces or anyone in her life who could kind of help her get to a better place, she just
Mm. She falls down her rabbit holes too much.
yeah, exactly. Like she kind of yeah had no one, I guess, holding her back, and like now she's kind of reached the point in the story where I don't think she needs that supervising
Yeah.
stuff as much, but like she did at one point.
Yeah.
And so it's like yeah, like it. She sort of blossoms, yes, but not in as good a way as she could.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
I did
Um,
like how cat themed her site was. It was like without that tempering influence, all of her awakening objects were cat themed. So all of her site is cat themed. It's just like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, she did
yeah.
that. That makes sense.
But yeah, so Verona ends up going to the BHI, kind of gets tangled up in the turf war, and dies trying to save the life of a goblin.
Yeah, she gets Layla throoped.
Yeah, you hate to get throoped. You never want to get throoped,
No,
but she does.
I the saddest bit of this to me was when we see the vision of it later and she's like mangled under the tree and the goblin was trying to get her out or like tugging on her
Mm,
hand. Like that was heartbreaking.
yeah.
Um
Um, yeah. So bummer for Verona, but she's got a cool bunch of others around her again. The Tooth Fairy was great to see. I loved it. There was a lot of cool shit there for sure.
Yeah, the Tooth Fairy was very fun,
Mm,
horrifying, but awesome. Which that was the Verona's whole thing. And I mean, I guess like to talk on the shocking revelation for Verona at least that she's actually somewhat of a good person. Um, like to me, it feels like what sort of happened here is even in like alt Rona's life, she
mm,
maybe didn't have Lucy or Avery, helping her to become more aware of certain issues or whatever. Like she admits a lot that she's more tuned into stuff because they pointed it out to her. But she was also always the sort of person who was drawn to people like that. Like it's like she's acting like it's an accident that her and Lucy were friends. Um, and it's like I feel like with Verona, her thing has always been that she didn't fit in with like people or normal people or whatever. So she's naturally always sorts of always gravitated to like others or outcasts or whatever, downtrodden people. because she feels more connected to them, and so she just like, of course, she was always going to like make these sorts of connections with the people who would help her be better with this stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, like I don't. It's just funny that sort of such a shock to her that it's like even without Lucy, she naturally was just going to make friends with the sorts of people who would help her be a better person.
Mm.
And like, yeah, she's just more attuned to these sorts of problems naturally than she gave herself credit for, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I also, sorry, I'm backtracking a bit, but I just saw a bit of my notes we skipped. A lot of people pointed out. I wanted to make note of the fact that, like, we saw Verona taking care of Haley as she was like, vomiting and shitting
Yes.
everywhere. And that's such a great contrast to Musser and Timothy.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like as much as the Kenneteers don't succeed in being capable, as Musser reminds them later on, they all succeed at not being cunts, basically.
Yeah, no, they all make their own little
Yeah,
families that really care about each other, right? Like that are connected and work well
yeah.
together.
And like I guess like this is just a chapter as well. It's one of those ones that really makes you notice how much Wildbow has planned to this and has been laying the seeds for this. Like this
Mm,
arc has had Verona explicitly call out how she'd be a worse person without Lucy and Avery like a number of times. Like we're
yeah,
primed to have that in our heads.
yeah,
We sort of
yeah.
re-met Cass this arc, and Avery reminded us that Cass was the one who was like very similar to Verona, and she's like Verona's only friend at the BHI. Um, like I think Verona also had a few more of those moments where we were reminded that she's like Alexander in a lot of ways, and then we obviously see that she and him kind of connect, and that's how she gets to the BHI. Like it's just Wildbow's been planting all these seeds very overtly for an arc, and they all come to fruition in this final chapter.
Yeah, um, yeah, it's a great payoff for sure. There's a lot of very cool. I do like that we get to see a lot of familiar faces again. Like
Yeah, there was a lot of like, there's a bunch of background bits where like, like, oh god, I can't remember what they were now, but I just remember reading a bunch of lines where it was like character we hadn't seen for 10 arcs would get a quick mention. I'd be like, oh, that's right.
yeah, exactly. It was nice. It
And
was
like, and
very
seeing
nice.
Florin and Alex be their best selves by taking this like scrappy young girl and getting her into the BHI,
Yeah,
that was the part of Alexander we always liked. Like everyone's always
yeah.
like, yeah, the good part of
Oh,
Alexander was he genuinely wanted everyone to hang out.
yeah. I miss Alexander compared to Charles and Musser. Oh. But when you
Yeah,
think
we really
about it,
pulled.
it's Alexander's fault that the world is in this situation.
Yeah, but you got to think in retrospect. He wasn't that bad, huh? Like it's
No,
so funny
yeah,
that they killed
no,
like Alexander and Briston. I was like, oh wait, there was worse.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, so Verona and Avery wake up with both feeling like they've lost, which is
Mm.
rough. And we already knew that they needed two out of three wins, and so
Yeah,
the first two both being seeming losses is really stressful. It makes you think,
yeah,
oh, like, oh
it's
shit, it's
over.
over. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You sort of go into Lucy's one being like, well, I mean, they've already lost, right? Like unless Musser's
yeah,
taking a really long time to do badly. Um,
yeah, or Lucy does really, really well, or something.
Yeah, so much so that they can apparently somehow count that for two. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
You sort of come into this and you're like, well, we're going to need something out of left field to win.
yeah. Um, so yeah, we go into Lucy's, and she's reunited her family and fights against an army that has come to contest their growing power, seemingly.
Yeah, and I do love how it was like history was rewritten. So Lucy was alone and didn't have her family, and then she got magic. And obviously, the first thing she did was like reunite her family and turn them into like crusaders for justice. It was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we learn that. So, yeah, Lucy was cut off from her family, which is, I don't know, it felt like bullshit to me at the time. But thinking on it now, maybe not, because it is the exact same thing that
Yeah,
they've done. They've
well,
asked for Musser. So it
it's
does seem
essentially
fair.
the core premise of the challenge, really.
Yeah, but it's still, it seems, I don't know. I guess it just seems worse because it's
Well, it
Lucy.
catches you
End
off
of
guard
story.
because she's the first Kenneteer who had a family worth tearing her away from.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. We don't obviously Verona wasn't torn away from Brett, and Avery seems to not have been, or we don't hear about Avery being torn away from her family. So yeah, it's rough.
No, but if you've got that Avery who's stuck in like flying under the
Yes.
radar
Yes.
mode, her family wasn't doing her any favors at that point. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah. Um. So yeah, the Ellingson family plan is they've kind of gone around and set up. This is it seems like this is their second domain that they've set up in the town. Is that right? Like, I, I wasn't quite sure exactly what their playbook was, but it seems like they're going around setting up domains for each of them in different towns and making enemies along the way, I guess.
yeah. The vibe I got was that they got chased out of their first domain,
Mm.
and this was the second one that they set up after they got chased out of it. And then the talk of the third domain was basically, if we lose this one, we'll set up another
Mm.
one somewhere else. Like, we're going to keep, like, it was the vibe of, the classic Lucy shit. Like, we'll just set up a new domain and we'll keep fighting. Like, yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
So I
Um,
don't know. Yeah, I got the vibe that, yeah, they were just like constantly sort of, getting chased out of wherever they were.
yeah, but it seems fun. The Ellingson practitioner dynasty has begun, and I hope this is where the Lucy's epilogue ends up. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Awaken Booker, and honestly, I'm still shocked that we haven't had a conversation about Awakening Jasmine at this point. Like, I remember when she first became aware at the start of, or the end of Arc 17, we are like, surely that'll be a conversation that happens very soon. And somehow it still hasn't been.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so we've got all three results, and Musser finishes up, and their results are compared, and the Kenneteers lose pretty badly.
But I love how this is like delivered too, because it's not just that they lose. It's like the judges put the scores together in a bunch of different ways, and they like lose every time. Like, it's
Yeah.
like, okay, let's look at the raw numbers or whatever. It's like, oh, you lose, and it's like, yes, but what about if we did X, Y, Z? They still lose. Oh, yes, but what if we did this? They still lose. Like, you're just there, and it's like, God, fuck, like it's just constantly
Yeah.
the Kenneteers have lost to Musser in this.
I still can't believe that 60% of Musser's contingent choose to back him, by the way. But I was kind of thinking about this, like, because this reality doesn't have the Kenneteers, so presumably there's less challenge against his like shitty ideologies in the simulation, which would mean that maybe 60% is more than would back him currently in this reality. I don't know. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws.
I feel like
No,
more than
actually,
60% backed him in real life. Like,
yeah. But considering the way that Musser is defeated is by getting people to not back him, I stand by this that the Kenneteers, I mean, they make the difference, right?
well, yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
mm,
Um, but it's like, I don't know. I guess just the idea that in this theoretical thing, 60% would back him against him. I mean, that's basically what happened at the end of Arc 17, right? Is
no, you're right.
he left, and I think there were like 60 practitioners left. It was only like 15 of them who took the Garrix out. So that's still sort of 75% who were so
Yeah,
pro Musser
yeah,
they wouldn't trust the Kenneteers.
yeah. Although those are I guess I'm assuming that the judges know what's in the heart of these simulated people, as opposed to just asking them. Like, they internally might not want to leave Musser, but even so, they wouldn't necessarily
I
go with the Garrix. You know what I mean?
I didn't think that was. I thought the parameter was, would they fight on his behalf? Not like, do they really
Yeah,
want
sure, sure, sure,
what
sure.
like,
That's fair.
yeah, like I don't know that I don't know that truly believing in him as a good leader was necessarily a
Yeah,
part of it. It was like,
yeah,
would they
you're right.
back him and fight for him? So it's like just the same as how he operates in real life. I
Mm,
guess is how I
mm,
viewed it.
rough. Um, yeah, but they've lost. But Lucy can't let it go in a classic Lucy moment. Musson has given up the claim to his legitimacy, and Lucy wants to know why, basically. He won't admit it, but Durocher hears enough of this conversation to put it together.
Oh, it's so good, this bit. It's just so good.
Yeah.
Like the bit where Durocher just taps on the arena and it all turns around from there and it's just glorious to read.
Yeah, no, it's very good, isn't it? And it's the perfect payoff to what the Kenneteers have been doing, which is just trying to stop all the bullshit, you know? I mean, Lucy specifically, I guess, but all of them. And the bullshit is stopped. Durocher puts the pieces together, and yeah, Musser's fucked.
And I love how Durocher handles this too. Like there's two things here. Like obviously the first one is she sort of calls out that she doesn't want Lucy to do this through the proper channels with the judges, because the judges have checks to basically make sure you can't just use challenges as fishing
Yeah.
expeditions. Like
Yeah.
you can't get him to reveal other secrets, just by wantonly suing him in court.
Yes.
But she's like, I'm not the court, so I'm just going to, use my personal power to interrogate him and basically force him to reveal this secret that he's hinted at through your challenge. And so, like, I just love that she's like, no, 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 no. Let's not do this through the proper channels because they're designed to protect his other shit, and I want to hear about his other shit. And then the best part is when she retracts her support from him, she's sort of like, take me out of the simulation, and Grobard's here. And she's like, oh, you can't do that, like, blah, blah, blah. And Durocher's like, actually, I'm really powerful, and so I just can and do it. And the judge is like, oh, okay. And I was like, fuck, that's what Musser does to everyone. Like, she's done the same bullshit he does to everyone on him, where she's just flexing her power to be like, no, but I say it is, so just make it happen. And you just love to see him choke on his own bullshit like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah. The I guess this is part of the next one, but Musser's insistence of like, no, but I only did this because I didn't have natural talents or whatever. It's so fucking pathetic. Like, it's
Yeah.
so purely pathetic.
But just, yeah, I guess the way she beats him is essentially by being the Musser to his Kenneteer, and you love to see it because she's doing it for the right reason.
Yeah.
Like, it's the best, best version of karma I've ever seen.
Yeah. So yeah, Durocher vows to have Musser's castle turned to sand, and the Kenneteers cast him out. And he's done.
Yeah, and I love the bit where even Growlbard moves away from him, and he's like, really? You're taking the moral high ground? And she's like, no, I'm just worried Durocher's literally going to kill you.
Yeah.
I that because, first of all, even Growlbard isn't stupid enough to pretend that she's got any moral high ground, because we know what she is. But also, like, again, this is just such a perfect microcosm of, like, Musser's unity of his thing came from all the other powerful people being a part of his crew, not being actively against him. And it's like, as soon as you turn one person against him, all the loyalty crumbles because they're only with him because of the power and the momentum. Whereas, like, the Kenneteers, their group is with them despite the fact they're up against Charles, Musser, and the Wild Hunt, who are all way too powerful for them. Like,
yeah, and explicitly their group was formed with some betrayals in mind, and even so, they still have stuck together. Mostly. Still on the fence about Rook, but we'll see.
Look, it's not 100% success rate, but it's a lot better than Musser's.
It's a lot better, yes.
So if I can be a bit of a stick in the mud here, though, like, as much as, we all love Durocher for what she did in this chapter, a part of me is also, like, still a little bit shitty at her for where her priorities are at. Like,
yeah.
Because she talks about how bad Musser is, and she, like, she hates on him, and obviously that's true, and we're all behind it. But it's like, part of her issue really just seems to be that it was Louisa specifically, or like that he kept being friends with her and using her despite, and like lied to her. And it's like, I guess the point of comparison I'd make is like, she starts to get on this high horse about how he's a terrible person who would do anything, and like, that's why she can no longer associate with him. It's like Charles is literally in the room, and she hung out with Alexander after he forswore her. So it's like,
Yeah.
This is a great start for Durocher, but it's sort of still like, okay, this is at the moment, this is still a little bit like too little, too late for me to be like, you're a good person.
No, I don't think Durocher is a good person, but like,
She's an
I
effective
think,
tool in this chapter. Like,
yeah, she's a boss babe for sure. But no, like, because to me, it's like Louisa is almost the symbol to us as the audience, but also I think it to these characters of like a capital G good practitioner. You know what I mean?
yeah, well,
And
the crows are like as close as we've got to people who are fully in the system, but not complete shitbags.
yes, and so it's like it's almost like a violation of a symbol in Durocher's eyes, which makes it more of a crime. You know, like
Yeah.
murdering a baby deer or whatever is worse, obviously, than murdering a baby. I don't know, duck. Let's say.
Um,
You know what I mean? I don't think that analogy quite held up, but you kind of get what I'm saying. Hopefully,
yeah. No, like I do. I guess that's the thing. I'm still like, okay, like it's good to know that Durocher has a bar,
yes.
but can we
Yeah,
raise it a
there
little
is
bit?
a
Like,
line somewhere.
well, yeah. Like this is great, but like, can we keep rising it? Like, now that she's taken a stand against neutrality, can we sort of get like Lucy and the Kenneteers to worm their way in there and just be like, hey, all of this other shit's pretty unacceptable too, right? Like you see that.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, love what Durocher did in this chapter, but also part of me is just like, you could be doing so much more.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I guess speaking of, I do think it's funny that like Charles is kind of friendly-ish to Durocher. Well, I'm going to be honest. I read their interactions as borderline flirty. Um,
Yeah, for sure. There's sexual tension there.
but like she was worse about his forswearance than Ray, right? Like it feels like a shitty double standard to me that it was like he's gone out of his way to bully Ray. It's like Ray was the one who took him in while he was forsworn and tried to make some amends at the end. Durocher maintained bullshit neutrality and like he's gone after Ray, but like is it just because she's untouchable or does he think he has a shot now? Like it's a bit weird how she's seemingly gotten off scot-free in Charles's books.
Mm, yeah, I don't know. Badass. What can you do?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like there's got to be more to it than just it's because she's too powerful. Because otherwise, I feel like he'd still be shitty to her, just like not
I
antagonistic,
mean,
if that makes
they just
sense.
they've got a bit of a thing, you know, and
I mean,
Charles obviously
yeah,
lets his personal feelings get in the way of his
yeah.
shenanigans. Like we know
No,
that.
that's true. And I definitely feel like that read was in this chapter both ways, which would be. I mean, I'm weirdly behind it as a ship. is that
Yeah,
is that weird? I don't know.
yeah. No, I like it. I mean, you know, it kind of works. Like Durocher is set up as the one who tames the wild, large
Yeah.
powers in the world, so it's
I
kind
mean,
of
yeah.
perfect.
She fucks with big powers. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, maybe literally. I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly.
But yeah, so the Kenneteers can't catch a break though because winter has come. The Night King is here and he's coming for them.
This is a fun way to end the chapter. This reminds me of like, do you remember like at the end of Arc 7, it was like Alexander left and we were like, oh shit, when's he going to come back? Like, this is such a big cliffhanger. And then the next one was literally the Alexander chapter where he gets shot in the head. And it was a bit like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, exactly,
okay.
exactly
And
right.
like, this is a bit the same. It ends with winter and you're like, oh god, now the real fight begins, I guess. And then 19.z is like, oh, and in the background, they kind of get them to back off. It's fine.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, let's get into it, shall we?
Yeah.
19Z, we're in the mind of Ryan. So yeah, we watch Ryan, a lucky guy, playing numbers on his beeping machine before he gets interrupted by his high school crush.
Yeah, I love how he just constantly refers to things as his numbers. He's like, "Yep, I've crunched some numbers. I've made some numbers." I was like, "What is he
It's nonsense,
talking
right?
about?"
Yeah, it's two people typing on the keyboard to protect against hackers level of stuff. But then, of course, it is revealed what's going on. But yeah, I mean, and this is like a perfect interlude in the sense of it's got the exact thing that I love the interludes for, which is getting a new character and trying to figure out who they are, as well as what like getting a new type of magic and some new types of others and figuring out what's their deal. And it's always so much fun. Like the first half of an interlude like this is always kind of just a short story of here's a cool new system in the world, check it out, and it's delightful.
Yeah, yeah, these ones that just sort of throw you in the deep end. It's like new character, new practice, new environment. Like you just got to kind of figure out what's happening and enjoy it just for what it is. Like they're as good as interludes, which are like, clutch story people. Like, when you suddenly cut to the Musser interlude or something and we get so much insight. Those are
Yeah,
great. But I love these ones that are just like, here's some new shit as much.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, Ryan's looking to get lucky, but before he can, lucky gets him. That's the tagline for this interlude. Hope you
that's
like
that's
it.
on that's on the poster for this. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, like. I mean, this is great because luck is like weirdly present in the chapter, like right from the get go. And it's this thing
Yes.
where like Laurie shows up and he's like, "Oh, is this bad luck?" And
Mm.
like the answer is no, it's good luck. But that's the trap. Like I love that the good luck is the problem. Like this practice is so fun that it's literally like, yeah, he's getting good luck, and this is the concern is that things are going well for him.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's very fun, isn't it? The Lady Luck as the villain of Ryan's life here is very fun, and the fight scene slash chase scene they have is ridiculous. It's so cool. Um, I love this bit. Ryan gets hit by a car. He front flipped through the air and landed on his feet unharmed. Luckily unharmed, which just made me laugh so hard because of how ridiculous it is. Like this luck-based power is just such shenanigans, and I think it's so good.
My favorite part was when he gets into that building later and there's people waiting for him and they push a marble or something and like Rube Goldberg's all these tables to flip over and form like a barrier so he can't escape. And it's just it's like so unnecessarily extra, but it's because they're all these luck-based envoys and incarnations. Like it's just
Mm,
you're right. It's a very fun practice.
yeah,
And I love this idea that like he's having to track his luck as he goes.
yeah,
Like he has
yeah,
to take note of when he has bad luck and go because that on the face of it, that's essentially this like weird impossible task. And he sort of has measures in there for when he gets it wrong, but just like that sounds like a nightmare to track and
yeah.
manage.
It's kind of it gives me like counting cards vibes of like
Yeah.
having to keep this process running constantly so that you're kind of aware of what's going on.
Yeah,
Which
the
is yeah,
gambling sort of imagery is very present right from the start of this chapter. Like the way luck is sort of tied into gambling and fortune. I mean, the word fortune is the key word in this chapter, obviously, and like I kind of loved how these ideas are like I as I was reading this, I'd already mapped like Lady Luck and stuff to these kind of this mafia who he had gambling debts and they were chasing him for his gambling debts. Is sort of what it felt like.
yeah,
Um, I mean, the other comparison that I thought made a lot of sense, actually, that I wanted to bring up is like, so this chapter kind of feels like it leans into this vibe of like karma slash luck, uh, like money essentially. Like
yeah,
he's gambling with luck and stuff, and so it sort of feels like he was using the computer to like print his own money or kind of like have income that was off the books, I guess. Like
mm.
that's what the problem Lady Luck has with him is it's like essentially it felt like he was kind of doing crypto stuff to me is the vibe like take the blockchain side of crypto away. I only am sort of talking about like the unregulated financial currency
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
Like what he was doing was getting like Lady Luck manages all the fortune in the region, and it's kind of like, everything goes through the tax offices and is reported, and it's all fine. And he just had all this, off the books income, and in much the same way, certain governments cracked down on unregulated currency because they don't like what it stands for. It kind of feels like that's what Lady Luck was doing here. Like he was going around the proper channels and getting punished for it.
Yeah, and then they recruit him into their crack techno crimes division.
Well,
Uh,
they try to, but he just manages to
but he says
use
no.
it to
Yeah, here's the
buy his way
alternate
in.
tagline for the poster, Elliot. His luck has run out, but then he runs out on luck, which is what happens.
Oh, that's good. Oh, get the movie ready.
Yeah. So yeah.
This chapter will be the first Otherverse thing to get made into a movie. Obviously, this is where you start.
Yeah, of course. You start here with the Aurum Ryan, which is the reveal that we get, of course. And it's a fun reveal. Do we know, because this we see this end right as he's going to visit the Aurum Dame, presumably challenging them to kind of take their spot.
Yeah.
Do we know how? Like, I think we know it was like a game of chance or a gambling game with the previous Aurum that he, that he won and became the Aurum from that.
Well, so we saw the Aurum Dame take over from the little mouse in Arc 13, and that was it was like that game that it was they had like it was like Liar's Dice from Pirates of the Caribbean, but it was about binding, and it was like a weird mix of strategy and luck.
Yeah.
And so I guess presumably it was something similar. I mean, we weren't also with those rituals that they kind of changed the rules for each one. So
yeah,
I assume it was like fundamentally based around fortune and strategy, but somehow different.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm assuming he cheated to win by like using all the luck juice he had left.
Well, is it cheating if you're in a contest to be the Aurum? It kind of feels like it's just the rules of the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fair. I mean, that's because it's a stupid system. Yeah. Like, this is what we talked about. I remember when the Aurum Dame beats the mouse, it's like, it's because she just takes a 50-50 gamble and wins.
Yeah.
And the mouse is like, well, that's in our jurisdiction, so I guess it tracks.
Yep,
and I was like,
fair enough.
You need to rethink your jurisdiction because that's dumb as hell.
No. If you're going to be the judge of fortune,
then don't have a judge of fortune. That's stupid.
Nah, that's how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other thing to talk about here is so like Ryan is, doing everything he can to escape Lady Luck, and we sort of see why, because she corners him for this little bit and basically outlines what her and her cronies' plans for him are.
Mm.
And they're pretty intense. Like, this is some of the most fate worse than deathy shit we've seen in this story.
Mm.
For like, he'll have to spend decades cleaning up all the messes. And I think the thing that really got me is even if he gets like 99% of them, then they'll like punish him a whole bunch and make it really terrible.
Yeah.
And they're going to rig it so that happens. Like, he can't get 100% success rate. And it's like, okay, so the purpose of this isn't to make him clean up. Like, because Ryan's clearly a bit of a fuck up and he's made a big mess. Like,
yes.
I'm all behind.
Getting him to clean it up would be fair enough.
Yeah. But that doesn't seem to be the point here. They want him to clean it up and they're going to punish him for, 60 years of torture or whatever they say. Like,
yeah.
And, like, I guess that was like where this sort of whole vibe came in. It's like, yeah, like, Ryan's a fuck up, but like, I can't help but kind of be on his side with running to do shit like take the Aurum, because I mean, he reminds me of Charles in that he's avoiding like circumstances that are much more terrible than anyone should have to be faced with.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, it's just such a bullshit system.
No, it definitely is. But yeah, I mean, he finds a way, in the same way Charles did, he finds a way to change his fortune, I guess.
Yeah, like, the more we learn about the judges, the more you're like, wow, nobody gets into this job for the right reasons.
There is no right reasons, yeah.
I mean, John was about as close as we've seen, and it didn't work out for him.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so Ryan is now the Aurum Ryan, and he chats to Charles as they head towards St. Victor's. The Carmine is about to awaken the St. Victor's kids.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting jump. It's gonna. We'll probably talk about this more at the end of the chapter, I guess. But like, the Orm is really just talking to Charles here, and is clearly like trying to grapple with the meaning of life. Is sort of the vibe. Like he's talk. Like the talk so much here is about like how the judges are contradictions, and
Mm.
the sort of talk between the lines to me that was coming out was that Ryan is basically walking around here. We learn that like Laurie is dying, and
Yeah.
like Ryan's selfish acts within his role was to like take care of Laurie and his brother, and that's sort of running out. And I guess the vibe I got was that he's sitting here like 20 or whatever years later, kind of looking around and going, what was the point of any of this? Like, what have I done? I caused a mess, got out of it, tried to help my friends. Now they're dying anyway. Like, what is the point of life? Is sort of the vibe I got from him here.
Yeah. I mean, he's getting to that stage that all the judges seem to get to, except, well, maybe some of them don't, but we know that some of them do, of questioning what am I doing here?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll save the rest of my rambling on this for the end of the chapter. But
Mm,
yeah, like it's definitely here right from the start as he starts talking to Charles. You're getting these vibes of like this dude feels like he's existentially kind of lost.
yeah. Um,
But
yeah.
yeah, I suppose the other thing we really get out of the conversation between the four judges here is it really feels like we start to get some proper insight from their end on like why they're happily just going along with Charles's nonsense. Like Ryan sort of says he's on board because he realizes the system is broken too, and he just kind of likes cheating. Um, so he's kind of all for Charles's plan. Um, and I guess I don't know. I feel like him and Charles just have a lot of that conceptual overlap because of the way Ryan, like, was in a bad situation because the system was. Well, no, the system didn't screw him that much. He screwed it more, but yeah. But like the big one, I think, was like there's also the Alabaster who's there, and she basically my read on what she says is she's basically like the judges, we only have strength and safety while we're united. So I didn't want conflict within the group. So I'm siding with Charles because if he has a plan, I think we're better off doing whatever we do together, which is just this same Alabaster bullshit we saw in her interlude in Arc 13, where it's just like, as long as she's safe in her role, she's happy, and it means that she's just shit at her role. like,
Mm,
like she'll happily go along with Charles because the thing that's most important to her is that the judges are a unit.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and then the Sable, I think, is Ryan seems to write off the Sable as like, oh, he doesn't really make a choice. He's just a big spirit. He's an
Yeah,
edifice
he's
of the
just a
system.
force of nature.
Yeah, he's just going along with it. And I'm just going to put on my tinfoil hat and say I don't buy it. Like,
Yeah.
we're coming at this quite doylistically, but the Sable's the only judge we don't really know at this point, and
Yeah.
he's the judge whose domain is the Pale. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
Which is the title of the story. So you'd
yeah,
think it
it's
would be
like,
important. Yeah.
yeah, I'm just like, I don't buy that the Sable's just a spirit who's sitting in the back chilling. Like, there's a couple of other weird lines about how he's like, you know, like got a life or something, and they jumped out to me as like, I don't know. I feel like the Sable is going to be there's going to be some missing pieces there.
Mm, yeah, I think so too. I think we'll get more on the Sable next arc.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, so we see this awakening, and it's a different type of awakening that Charles has come up with and got the judges on board with, which is there's take backsies. They've scratched off the bit of the awakening ritual that says no take backsies, and they can decide to undo it anytime before they're, adults.
yeah, which is like not the worst idea. Like I was like, yeah, okay, like especially pre-18. I mean, a big thing in this story has been stop awakening kids. That's dumb. And Charles is sort of like, okay, we'll do it, but they can have an out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a good improvement. Like, has Charles done something chill? What a cool guy.
I think this is classic Charles because this is a good idea, and I back this, but it's also not really fixing the problem. Like the problem with practitioner society is not that they're awakening their kids too early. Like Mrs. plan to build practitioners who are involved in their community, respect others, and get their power from working in tandem with the others, fixes the actual problem that's going on, which is that practitioners are selfish dickheads. Charles's doesn't actually address that. It addresses one part of the problem, which is some people will get forsworn because of shit they do when they're teenagers. And it's like, yeah, that's a problem. But like, if you put the Negatiers side by side with the Kenneteers, I just can't be like, he's not fixing something that's on anywhere near the same level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So classic culprit shit where it's like, yes, this is a good step and I support it, but like you've missed the forest for the trees, bud. Like integrate what Charles has done with future iterations of the Kenneteers. I'd be all for that, exploring that sort of thing. But like, it's just wild to me that he's done this and then sort of stopped there. And meanwhile, they're getting taught specifics like by Forsworn. Like, aside from this ability to back out, I don't understand how they're different to all the normal practitioner bullshit.
Yeah, it's fair, but it's still an improvement. I don't know, like it's still a good step.
Yeah, again, he's a culprit. One step forward, and he's done. That's the culprit motto. One step forward, and that's
one step
plenty.
forward, then 0 steps ever again.
I also wanted to call out during this awakening ceremony. It's so funny how they got Yi Yun, the nice Forsworn person, who basically is like, "Hey, these are kids. That's kind of fucked up." And it was like that was Charles's. That was like the first thing we ever heard from Charles was that he was like, "Hey, don't awaken kids, miss. That's kind of fucked up." So fingers crossed, Yi Yun's going to betray Charles like Charles betrayed Miss. Keep that parallel going.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's also Nomi is this Negatier, and I think we talked about this last time we saw the Negatiers, but Nomi feels like their group's Lucy. Like she's constantly speaking up, just sort of taking stands. And I don't as the Negatiers are shaping up to be proper adversaries next arc. I'm very excited to see how Nomi and Lucy bounce off each other because I feel like they're similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, I feel like we're going to get these very interesting parallels with all the Negatiers. I'm jumping ahead of our notes a bit here, but I'm very excited for the confrontation, especially when they find out about this new type of awakening, because it gives this new way for this conflict to resolve, which is if they beat a St. Victor kid, that kid is going to go, all right, well, I'll unawaken, I guess, see ya, and then become innocent. And it's just like this weird, it's going to be such a weird and almost like impotent end to a conflict when it happens. And I think it'll really fuck with the Kenneteers in a very fun way.
Well, it's an interesting weakness in Charles's practitioners that, without forswearance or death, like they have an easier out, which is just to chicken out.
Yeah,
but I don't feel like
is that a weakness or a strength? I mean, like it also kind of means that they have a safety net,
Yeah, well, I don't know. Like in terms of with conflict with them, I feel like it's a weakness because it's easier to sort of break them because at a certain point they'll just decide it's easier not to be awoken.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it feels to me like this is the sort of thing that the Kenneteers will be able to take advantage of because they can just be like, "Hey, what if we like fixed actual problems for you?" Like I think it's Joshua is the one who was like his dad's a bit of a brute and it feels like implications of violence at home or something, and so that's why he was like drawn to the Abyss guy. It's like, hey, what if the Kenneteers just did something about that? I mean, not kill him, but what if we address the actual problem here for you? Like, I don't know. It feels like it's going to be something where this gives the Kenneteers more flexibility to be like, well, we can try and make things better for you.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be really fun. I feel like we were saying this last arc because we expected the Negatiers to be villains more quicker than they sort of have been, but yeah, same sort of rules. There's so much fun stuff to play with here. Like, there's a moment I think it is later on, but where the Negatiers like talk about the Kenneteers, and it's like, oh, do you think you could fight the 3 witches of Kennet? And it's just so fun hearing like the Kenneteers spoken about like bogeymen, like not like bogeymen as they are in the other verse, but like spooky, like campfire story sort of vibes. Like, I don't know. I there's so much fun stuff to play with here.
Yeah, 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 for sure. um, but yeah, so we then cut forward to the St. Victor's kids watching Lucy watch. So we got Ryan watching the St. Victor's kids watching Lucy, who was in the arena with Musser, and they just ditch the poor bastards. They've been out in the cold for a while, and no, see ya. They ditch. Nothing to do here, but they pass by a bunch of Winterfell heading to the confrontation, which is fun.
Yeah, and so this is where we sort of really learn that Charles actually really wanted his kids to get the win here, because
Yeah.
then they sort of win this competition for claim over Kennet.
Yes, they've defended Kennet from Musser. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this would have been presumably the start of him getting them to like actively usurp the Kenneteers.
Yup.
Which is just what's so funny about, like, he acts like they've really escalated things later in this chapter when he's like, "You've threatened Marisica and I've sworn oaths, so now we're against each other." And it's like,
after
bitch, you were like,
Christmas,
yeah,
parlay.
but it's like y- you were about to do that to the Kenneteers. Like, he's playing this bullshit game where he's like, "Oh, you've escalated and started shit now." It's like, you were doing it behind the scenes. Like, I think that's so funny that, you know, he was basically on the verge of trying to usurp them anyway, and now he's acting like they've been the aggressors.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know. Clutch Lucy for hearing that the Negatives were out there and not letting Musser get away.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, great work, Lucy, saving the day on that one.
Sorry, also something I forgot to mention as well. The Negatives, with their awakening ceremony, and just like, I wonder how they're coping with just how fucking insane their lives are now. You know, like their awakening ceremony where like the 4 judges are there, and then Marisica like emerges from the ground and gives them like blood kisses and stuff. Like, the Kenneteers had it fucking easy compared to that,
right?
just in terms of like, you know, fucking crazy horror shit they had to deal with.
Yeah, it's yeah, a bit of a weird one, isn't it? I'd feel pretty weird about getting a blood kiss.
And just like, I don't know, all these fucking giant powerful things, whereas like, you know, the Kenneteers, it was like there was some scary shit in town, but most of it was like, here's a goblin that farts funny, like, you know.
Yeah. But so yeah, we see the Aurum now watching the Kenneteers making their case to the Winterfell, and the backbone of their case is, you don't want to actually have to deal with us because word will get out and it'll fuck you up. But instead, why don't we agree to help uphold the standards of the Winterfell court to the same standard that we defend Kennet?
Which, do you understand what that means? Like, tangibly, does that mean it? Do they have to change how they do it? What does that
it
mean?
They have to? Well, because I think part of the core of this was like Guilherme is a part of Kennet, and so there'll be some aspect to like living with and defending Guilherme to the same extent they already would. That wouldn't mean that it's not that much of an additional step to do that on behalf of the Winter Court. You know what I mean?
Not really.
But
like, they were going to do it anyway. It's like,
yeah,
I don't understand.
I wonder, like, does this mean that they have to, break into Verona's room and blow it up, kind of stuff to people who slight the Winterfell court in the local area? Like, are they going to be summoned when the horn blows? Like, what? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, like I guess I don't really understand what they will have to do differently as a part of this sort of thing. Like, just like, I don't know. I don't know what the situation looks like where they're suddenly like, oh well, this factors into what we said we do for the Winter Court.
Yeah.
Singachi brings up a great point in chat, which is that they have quite often been sort of telling Guilherme to stop doing dumb winter shit, and they probably can't do that anymore. So that's fair. Like, they kind of have to embrace who he is now.
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, they win through their knowledge that the Winterfell know nothing about technology, which is fun. They do some emails. They schedule emails. The Winterfell court is defeated by scheduled emails.
Yeah, I mean, what this really reminded me of is, you know how, well, people like, live stream or upload footage of like police abuse or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's that same vibe of like because obviously the metaphor of the wild hunters, like abusive police, has come up a lot, and it feels like what Lucy has really managed to do here is sort of notice that they thrive on punishing people who are easy targets by getting them alone, and
Mm,
so this is sort of their equivalent of, hey, we've, we can we can publish, footage of your abuse, sort of thing, and that's going to hurt your reputation any more than whatever bullshit you think we're going to do. Like
mm,
it's such a great sort of version of like using public channels to name and shame, like corrupt police officers and stuff.
mm. Yeah, yeah. It's great. It's a great
Yeah.
moment.
I also love how Charles is here and he starts to get involved, and one of the fairy just like rebukes him with a single word and says, "This is not your role or jurisdiction," and Charles has to shut up, and it's just, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
so
fun.
good. A nice little reminder that seemingly the wild hunt is also something that can fuck with the judges, and in fact, the judges specifically stay away from this shit. Like, I love how this week we've seen that, like, both Durocher and the Hunt are like two people who are not necessarily anti-Kennet anymore, and both apparently seemingly able to beat the judges. Like, the judges are not that giant and infallible, and we're really getting reminded of that as we head into them, well, as we head into Charles explicitly being our antagonist now.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Um, then we get we get the final line here, which is the question personal to the Aurum has been answered. So what's all that about, huh?
My tinfoil on it is, I think the Aurum is maybe gonna turncoat and join the Kenneteers.
But what's the question? Is the question should I switch sides?
Yeah. So I think it's something like along the lines of, like, this is what we're talking about earlier, of like, for him it's kind of like, what is the point, like that's the thing. Like, I
Mm,
think
mm,
Ryan, I don't have an exact sort of question in mind, but it's something along these lines of, like, I think he's been looking at stuff and trying to think what is the point, I guess.
yeah,
Like yeah,
yeah. The thing
we
about Laurie dying in that earlier conversation definitely ties in to me to that.
yeah, like I felt like we saw a lot of him earlier questioning, yeah, just like why the judges even do what they do, like what is the purpose of them,
But
and
then what
then,
answer is given to him from this?
well, so the Wild Hunt, we've seen them stand in for this kind of nihilist viewpoint of like nothing matters, everything's the same, blah blah blah. And Lucy, time and time again, has sort of challenged that and said, "No, I'm going to use it
Mm,
to do cool new shit."
mm,
And when she, like, I feel like it's not a coincidence that we see her essentially beat the Wild Hunt. I mean, I know she didn't
yeah.
like kill them or anything, but
Well, yeah, you can't beat them. You can
yeah.
defer them and deter them.
But it's like this proof that like Lucy and the Kenneteers and just Kennet are working to build something better
Mm,
and are working together and actually have each other's back. And I
yeah,
think,
making lasting change.
yeah, like what we saw with Ryan as well. Like, I think the other thing that he's probably coming to terms with is the fact that he has always mostly just been out for himself.
Mm,
So I think, like, yeah, I reckon the Aurum, like, these questions are all circling around. What is his purpose as a judge? Why does he exist? And, like, the fact that he's alone. I think, yeah, I know I can see him starting to get on board with helping the Kenneteers, or if Verona comes for him, maybe giving up his role a bit more willingly. We'll see.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. That's my read on it. I admittedly only just finished this chapter a few hours ago, so I haven't had a chance to dive into the
No,
discourse and see what other people are thinking yet.
I think this makes sense. I think this makes sense to me. Like the Aurum Ryan coming to terms with the fact that all the things he tried to do to leave a little bit of a legacy, even though he wouldn't have the chance to really do that, you know, uh, meant nothing, have amounted to nothing. So he's kind of coming to terms with the fact that the changes that he's tried to make have been not up to his standard of quality, I guess. So maybe it's how can I do this in a better way?
Well, yeah, and he described himself as an unchanging sovereign of change, and like I think, yeah, like he's just sort of realizing that, yeah, his pattern hasn't achieved anything. Like, I mean, I don't think, yeah, like we never saw his brother. Like he talks about his brother as if his brother is the only person who was really ever with him or like had his back or anything. Never saw him, so like I feel like that's saying something, that the only person who was sort of on a team with him doesn't even make an appearance in this chapter.
Yeah. But yeah, they agree on a Christmas armistice, and then it's going to pop off, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. So something you mentioned before, you seem to think that Charles is also going to take Christmas off. I got the vibe that was just the Wild Hunt.
Oh, is that right? No, I got the vibe because they say at the end, like, "Oh, we're trying to be nice about this. Like, let us have Christmas or whatever." And Charles like, "Okay, is that not right?"
I thought that was the Wild Hunt.
Oh, okay. I've got to recheck this now.
Yeah, I'm loading up the chapter now. We're doing some live double checking. Chat's definitely agreeing with you.
Yes, I never win these kind of remembering the chapter fights because you read the chapter so much later than I do.
Yeah.
You got such an advantage. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. Okay.
As your holiday then, he turned. After they would be in conflict. So yeah, they get Christmas. So that's nice. They get a Christmas armistice.
Yeah, cool. So we can have some fun with like Sylvia and Nora visiting, and yeah. I mean, that's something I think this story does a lot, and I quite like that. You know, like Musser always left for 3 days, or there's always been little bits of quiet where the Kenneteers are allowed to prepare, and that gives the story these opportunities to do things like Nora's visit or Sylvia's visit, or I'll be shocked if the Promenade and the Wolf don't make their big third appearance pretty early into Arc 20. Like, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the end of our chapters for this week. I guess it's worth calling out that we have a discussion question that's going on at the moment this fortnight. A very serious and important discussion question, which is, what type of other is your pet secretly? And some of the answers to this have been very fun so far.
Oh, I can't wait. I should God, I don't know if you saw the footage I posted on Discord the other day, but I got an answer for one of my sister's cats. It's that fucking zombie cat. She just started biting my foot out of nowhere. It's crazy. Cats are evil.
Yeah.
Don't get a cat. That's my advice.
Yeah, good advice. So yeah, you can leave your answers to that discussion question in our discussion thread, linked in the show notes down below. And remember, you can also leave your predictions in our Pale Predictor form, which is also linked in the show notes.
Yep. Don't forget to check out our Twitter account at Pale Reflectcast. That's where we post news on stuff and memes. So, it's worth checking out probably.
Yeah. Every single day we post a new meme on the Twitter, so check it out there. And you can also check out the website, which is doofmedia.com, to find all the other great shows on the Doof Media Network. The Doofcast just came out with an episode on Everything Everywhere All at Once, and I'm very much looking forward to listening to that one.
Same. Yeah. That was a good movie. Yes, don't forget to stop by our Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia, because without that, we wouldn't be able to do this show, that Doofcast episode, any of our bonus shows. Like, we genuinely rely on that Patreon to keep being able to do this.
Yep. And if you, while you're on Patreon, why not go to Wildbow's Patreon at patreon.com/Wildbow. If you subscribe to his Patreon, he'll send you an email with some numbers in it. And I don't think you can use them for anything. I've tried putting my finger on the numbers and nothing seems to happen, but I don't know, maybe you can figure it out.
Wildbow's been crunching his numbers, but words keep coming out. It's very confusing.
But yes, so thanks for joining us, folks, and catch you next time.